Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Let the bathroom door open. Oh, well. I'm not going to get up and close it now. Well, because all the things I was working on over the weekend, everything on my computer is wrong. All right. Luke 14, verse 1 is where we are. Just going to adjust the width there. All right. It seems to jump around every time I do that. Well, that's good enough. All right. And it came to pass, as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. Let me just adjust this window one more time here. Just so... There, well, that'll do, but there we go. Which had the dropsy. And I was like, as I sat down, I just quickly looked at this when I brought up Bible Hub. And I was like, dropsy, huh? I'm like, well, what's that mean? Right? And I looked at the definition. Oh, where was it? Wrong place. There we go. I looked at the definition. Oh, here we go. It says here, I go and click. When I click on the word for dropsy, it's like, well, first of all, if I hover, it'll give me the definition, but you can't see it for some reason. For a while, that was working, which was great because I didn't have to actually click on every definition. Hydropikos, which they say definition, suffering from edema. It's like, thank you for defining a word with another word I don't know. And it's really the only time of... Now, when I look at the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance definition here, it gives me a little, insight into what they're thinking, why they think it's the right thing. From a compound of hudor and a derivative of... It's hard for me to read this because I don't know, am I missing one eye or something? Let's see. Does this help? No. Definitely not. Whatever. Optonomai, as if looking watery. So some word that has something to do with water. To be dropsical. Or have the dropsy. Now, I don't know what edema or dropsy is. I looked edema up. Apparently it's like this condition of swelling. And I know it's such a... I don't know, as dropsy, I thought it would mean like they're dropping all over the place, like they're falling down. But there's already words for that. But anyways, maybe it's more something to do with drooping or something. I don't know. But it's like when they get all swollen. Now, maybe that's right. I don't know because, I don't know for sure that there's this unbroken sort of curatorship of what they were observing there and the different languages they came to be. So I don't know, but we'll just go with that anyways. I don't think it's terribly important to the passage, but whenever we come across a word that we don't understand, that I don't understand, I'm going to assume that you don't understand it. Because it's certainly not something in common use. I've never heard of anyone having dropsy. I have heard of edema, but I couldn't have told you what it was if someone, if I got it on a quiz. What's edema? What describe the condition of edema? Well, this guy's sick. He's got something. And Jesus answering spake unto the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And they held their peace, and he took him and healed him, and let him go. And answered them, saying, Which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen into a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? And they could not answer him again these things. This is this, as I'm reading this whole thing, like about about them giving Jesus a hard time with healing on the Sabbath day, is such an interesting thing. Not for the reason you might think, or the reason that I've thought for years, what makes it interesting. And it is interesting on the sense of, like, you say, well, wow, they sure are hostile, one, right? They're watching him hostilely to see if he's going to heal on the Sabbath day because it's work. There's that level of it. And of course, that's the level at which it's in the gospel. That's why it's there. Because they want to communicate a point of doctrine that, that, hey, the Sabbath is not about just strict adherence to a code, and that doing something kind, even if it requires some effort, is not really what is meant by no work on the Sabbath day. No servile labor. No, like, there are certain works you can't do on the Sabbath. I mean, just being strictly legalistic. If you weren't, women weren't supposed to cook. The food was supposed to be prepared the day before. No housework for women. Though honestly, I don't, like, if I'm a man and I never do housework, doing the dishes for my wife on the Sabbath day might not be a violation of the Sabbath. I don't even look at it as work. It's not my job, right? If that's the way you do it in your house, right? Not that I'm not a big, like, oh, that's women's work or something. It's like, but there's always a division of labor in some way or the other. There's some, we got to each do our part, right? We ought to each do our part. So, and so the argument he's making is that, hey, doing good on the Sabbath day is not a violation of the Sabbath. Especially, I'm healing with miraculous power here. But here's the thing. What I find really interesting just now is the fact that this is even in the Bible in this manner is a testimony to the fact of the reality of the fact that he was healing people. For real. Because it seems to me, why would you even, if you wanted to make a claim that Jesus did a miracle, I just can't think of the 4D chess they would have to be playing in their minds to thinking like the way, hey, if we say the Pharisees objected to the miracles he was doing on the Sabbath day, because it's counterintuitive. You wouldn't think that would be, like, you wouldn't, if he was doing healings and stuff, you wouldn't think like, oh yeah, and they totally flip out because he was doing it on the Sabbath day. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that he seems concerned about. More concerned about the doctrine of when it's okay to do these things than he is about the fact that he's doing a miracle. The fact that he's doing a miracle is not so important as that the question of whether doing good or evil is lawful on the Sabbath day. You know what I mean? Like, the question of the legal question is actually foremost, and the fact that it's over a miracle is incidental to the story. And what I'm saying is, like, that kind of a detail, to me, like, as thinking in terms of someone, I'm obviously not a skeptic, but I am more skeptical than some people. I mean, or at least, in the course of my faith, I was more vulnerable to skepticism, to unbelief. I was vulnerable because I'd be like, yeah, it's like, well, it's easy to say someone did a miracle a couple thousand years ago. You know what I mean? But, people aren't doing many miracles today. Oh, they are, and here's this guy, and but he's fake. That guy's a fake. Oh, but I heard this story over there. It's like, but there's no records. Just like with Thomas, everyone wants to stick their fingers in Jesus' wounds. You'd much rather put your fingers in his wounds and see, oh yeah. You are back from the dead, aren't you? I remember seeing you killed. I know you're alive. I won't believe it, because they saw him quite dead. Because some people think, oh, he wasn't quite dead. It's like the soldiers stabbed him in the side to confirm his death, and the reason water came out and not just blood was because of the. It has to do with the separation, or I forget. I shouldn't get into areas that I'm not. I mean, I've read about it, but it has to do with the level of trauma that he was experiencing. That there was watery fluid. I read something. I was like, oh, that's interesting, but it's not the kind of thing I walk away with as with like an encyclopedic knowledge of the medical, the medical examination of what would happen to someone under that kind of stress, and what are the physiological responses to it. So I don't know, but there's writings that some people have spent a lot of time researching that kind of a thing and the likely outcomes. I mean, there's not a lot of firsthand research you can do, but we do have a lot of understanding of what happens to people when they undergo severe trauma, and it's very similar. Anyways, so I mean, the reason they did that, and the reason and the blood and the stuff came out, because it's like, and the soldiers were convinced he was dead, so he was dead, and certainly Thomas fully expected it. He's like, I'm not, he wasn't thinking like, oh, well, maybe he didn't die. Maybe he snuck off. No, he was convinced. But anyways, as someone who's maybe a little more susceptible to skepticism than other people, I find that maybe not compelling evidence as far as like but it is a piece of circumstantial evidence. The idea that the whole issue of the Sabbath would be like that they would have an argument over the Sabbath. There was not just about his disciples picking corn or some other thing. It would go down to miracles. Like that they had a problem with him doing miracles on the Sabbath. It's so ridiculous on the face of it that it must be true, because it's not the sort of thing you just make up. They say you can't make this stuff up. Like, there's some things in life are just so bizarre that you can't make it up. I mean? Like, because people would be like, that's unbelievable. No one would believe that. No one would believe on the Sabbath day he was healing people and they had a problem with it. They weren't like, if I saw a miracle, I'd be impressed. Most people would say that. Like, like if I told someone like, hey, I can prove God exists, watch this. And then, did a miracle for them, something that they was convinced. Like, let's say they had a severed hand and I made it come back. Right? That would convince even the most hardened skeptic. Maybe this dropsy thing is not such a big deal, but, they didn't understand much about diseases, and the fact that he could heal things, they were hostile enough to just assume, well, is it necessarily God? You can always justify all kinds of things to yourself to justify being obtuse, in a situation. There's always justifications for not listening, justifications for unbelieving. It's very easy to find reasons to not believe. That's the thing. So I always find it good to point out the reasons to believe. Is that I'm not saying like I said, I'm not saying this is like some sort of like, oh, it's just such proof of a miracle. There's precious little proof of anything outside of geometry. So it's more of just, it's a bit of circumstantial evidence that I find interesting at the least. Okay. Where did it jump ahead? Oh, okay. I don't know why every once in a while I'll look up and it's jumped ahead. And he made this argument earlier. You remember in an earlier chapter, the same thing happened. He healed on the Sabbath day. And he says, well, if you have an animal that falls into a hole on the Sabbath day, you get them out right away. That's what straightway means. You don't like wait till Monday or Sunday. You don't wait till the next available work day when the animal's dead. You know. I mean, what he's saying is you show that kindness to animals, even though it's, it's not your normal everyday work. It's not exactly servile labor. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of labor. I mean, and and there's a lot of labors that you can do. There's a lot of work, right? Like mental work. Like for someone whose occupation has nothing to do with physical labor. That thinking about certain things on the Sabbath could be work. Like if you're going to be really strict about it. I'm not of that school at all. I'm just saying, though, if you're going to be strict about it, if you're going to be legalistic about the Sabbath and a Christian about it at the same time, because you can't just stop at the outward. You can't just I'm resting on the Sabbath. Doodly doodly doo. I mean, I think a lot of people understand what actual work is. Like, I don't think, work, I'm just doing my accounting. That's not working. But, people would see that as work. But on some level, your thoughts have to come into consideration. Every thought brought into captivity to the obedience to Christ. If you're going to be literal and legalistic about the Sabbath, which I do not recommend. So I've gone over the Sabbath idea quite, I think, enough in Luke to not have to go over it again just in this study. So I won't. No. And, it goes into I did a special on how the Christian observes the feast days, and it's a similar idea. We observe the Sabbath day in a Christian way, in a way that is internal and that is according to the Spirit. According to the Spirit, not I don't mean necessarily the Spirit of God, which of course I do include, but when I say that, I mean specifically according to the spirit of the law, according to what the Sabbath is supposed to represent for us. That we should enter into the rest and cease from our worldly pursuits and from the pursuit of the things of the flesh. This is something that is supposed to, I want that to overtake my life, so that even my pursuit of the things of the flesh, and by that I just mean my general work and stuff, becomes consumed in the rest of the Lord. That even in my labors I have rest. Even in my distress I have communication with God, and I'm in touch with God in much the way I would be expected to be on the Sabbath. That I would be centered, my life would be centered around the Lord in such a way that it's like I'm always with Him. I don't have to go to church to be with God, but that God is with me always. Not just that He's with me in the fact that He's promised to be with me, but in the fact that there's an active engagement just about all the time, ideally. That I'm actively engaging with the Lord in every aspect of my life. That He is my constant companion. All right, so I said I wasn't going to explain it, and then I just sort of did. Verse 6, and they could not answer him again these things. They couldn't say, because He's chosen an example that must have worked for every man in the room. Like there's no one who could get up and say, I haven't, or without maybe implicating a friend. Well, I have, Maybe they thought it was likely enough that one of the other Pharisees, would not be able to say, well, we never would do such a thing. No, somebody had done it. Or they thought it likely enough that they best not speak. Because if one of them has done such a thing, removed his ox or his ass from a pit on the Sabbath day, or any like thing, then their whole argument falls apart, or they must condemn their friend. And then who else would they condemn? I mean, it's like a similar thing. It's just the sort of thing they did. And Jesus, the analogy is quite clear. It's like a human being in such a state of suffering, shouldn't I also release him, even if it's on the Sabbath day? Are you so attached to the letter of the law? I mean, you really think? And also, like, isn't the fact that a Messiah play into this at all? Of course, they don't believe in him. Though the law was very strict about the Sabbath. Jesus' assertion is the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He is Lord of the Sabbath. As David was king over his people and could eat the shewbread, which was forbidden to all except the priest. And how the priests themselves do all kinds of servile labor on the Sabbath day. They hew wood. They kill animals. They prepare sacrifices. They haul water. They do all those things on the Sabbath day. And in a manner of thought, they are making it profane, making it common. Obviously, they're given a special, but his point was like, yeah, there's special exceptions made. I'm a special exception. That too. He's not emphasizing that here, though. Verse 7. And he put forth a parable unto those which were bidden, because he's eating at somebody's house, right? They didn't say anything. They didn't get angry. I think they kind of were like grudgingly accepting his argument. They didn't like it, but they were trying to come to grips with this guy who was doing all these miracles. There's going to be naturally, like him or not, there's going to be an argument among these people. Like, well, but he's doing all these miracles. I mean, have you ever seen a miracle? I've seen 5 with watching him. And so there's going to be, and we know that there were factions among the Pharisees, some people who were very strongly in favor of Jesus. Obviously, the faction that was strongly opposed was more numerous and strong. But up until the crucifixion in that moment, there is a lot of, there's not a complete unity against him, or at least there's not a unified opposition. There's a general opposition of more or less intensity, with some probably feeling more generally opposed and others feeling less. And it gets worse because he continues to offend them. It's one thing, the miracles on the Sabbath day, but what really ends up getting them is when he marches into Jerusalem at the head of a major procession, and it causes them to fear the Romans. He goes into the temple, he casts out the money changers, which, they also are going to fear, thinking that this could be the beginning of some sort of revolution. And they decide that he must be destroyed. With the majority of the Pharisees, and not just Pharisees, and the elders and the Sadducees of the Jews, they all come onto one side of the question ultimately. Or at least a significant number of the leadership, enough that the rest would become silent in the face of the Lord's destruction. And he put forth this parable to them that were bidden when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms. I think that the rooms, I don't know that they're eating in a place of multiple rooms. I think it might mean spots, like places, because room indicates the space you occupy. Like, we call this a room I'm in, which is a fun, but we also have this idea of room as a generic concept of space, make room. And so space or spot or room, I think, is probably what is meant. Do I even look it up? Is it really that important, Paul? Are you going to look it up real quick? I just want to see what's rooms. Huh. Oh, yeah, see, the word in Greek is one word. The pronunciation is there. but I can't see it well enough. The print's too small today. I know my eyes are all blurry this morning. And my contacts need to be scrubbed or replaced. Anyways, but the word "the chief rooms" is one word in Greek. Okay, that's just enough. So, and it means the chief seat. They were taking, oh, here's the good spot. I'll sit up here. You know, I mean, like, here's the best spot. I want to. People were, it's like a lot of things in life, right? You go to maybe an event, you want to get a good seat. Like you go to the movies, you say, I want to go to the movies early so I can get a good seat, whatever a good seat represents to you. Something in the middle, at whatever distance you like to sit from the screen. You don't want to be over in the corner or something, right? Same thing, restaurants, you want a nice table, right? Now, when you go to dine at someone's house as a guest, though, that's what we're talking about. Dining at the house of there's someone who's running something. Okay, and what it is they're dining at someone's place, and they are choosing the chief seats. And he has this to say to them: "When thou art bidden of any man to a wedding," a wedding's a good example of the kind of thing we're talking about, right? "Sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee and him come and say to thee, Give this man place. And thou begin with shame to take the lowest room." So what he's saying is like you come in and you take a really nice seat at a wedding up by the head table, and then fortunately, Christians have learned from history, and that's why when you go to a wedding, you usually find a little card with your name on it that tells you where to sit. They think these things out because it is embarrassing. There's nothing more embarrassing or shameful. Like you've sat in a big important spot and have someone go like, "Oh, the senator is here. Please, this is going to be his seat. Could you find another seat, please? Thank you." And of course, by now everyone's found their seat, and this is because the important people always show up last. They just come at the last minute. The last shall be first, and that's a good analogy for the way that works. Sometimes the most important folks are showing up last, and say, "Oh, the important guy's here. We got to make sure he sit up at the head table." So, well, look at there's so and so. Nobody likes him. We'll give him his seat. What's he even doing up there? So they ask him to move down. And if you've ever been, and I tell you what, I've never had that happen to me, but I have been in places. When I was young, I definitely was socially awkward. I still am, actually. I just cover for it by being much more outgoing than my personality really wants to be. It's just a trained behavior. Because it's like trying to take control of situations that I find intimidating. So I instead of instead of cowering in fear, I take control, and I kind of need to take control because they feel. Otherwise I just don't know. I feel it's confusing and difficult. It's hard to explain. When you're socially awkward, that can be the case. And so I've been in situations, informal situations, which are the ones I hate the most, where it's just, like give me a microphone and put me on stage and I'm fine. I was telling my wife the other day, someone could hand me, hand me a card with write any subject on it, and I could talk for an hour about it, and you'd probably get sick of me after the first 10 minutes, all right? But I'm completely comfortable in those situations. But, informal situations. And I've been in situations where I wasn't really wanted and told, hey, shove off. And it is humiliating. It's humiliating. It's the kind of thing that happens to you. You never want to let that happen again. You only have to have it happen to you once. And even if you have it happen, even if you've never had it happen, you listen to a story, because I could tell stories, but I'm not going to get into stories of my life. It's as interesting as it might be. It's not necessary for this lesson. You can imagine from just this story that Jesus uses how that might feel. You sit down, maybe you brought your whole family and you took a table up at the front. and then some people come and they ask you all to move, and you gotta get up with your whole family. Now, for some people, unfortunately, don't have the self-consciousness to be ashamed. Whatever, and I don't know what to say about it. You wouldn't. Oh, fine, I'll go. It's like I think some people would feel less embarrassed, but I always feel very embarrassed in those situations. So I understand. And these guys also strike me as the types. They value their social position. I don't think I value my social position. I don't care where I sit. I would instinctively go to the back, as Jesus is going to recommend. That's normal for me. It's not that. It's because I like being right. I hate making mistakes. I hate being seen making mistakes. Anyways, it's not that I just don't like that I misstepped. That's what gets me. It's not it's not what people really think of me. I don't really care about that. It's more about having made a mistake. I don't like making mistakes. I regret every mistake I've ever made. And because they tend to stick with you, or they stick with me. It's hard for me to forget. Maybe that's too much ego. When you can think what you like. I like to as well. I like to. I don't mind making mistakes if I can correct them. Social mistakes are uncorrectable, as far as they're sort of correctable, I guess. But you can't. The moment you can correct them, but it's not the same. Not the same when you correct like a mathematical mistake or something like that, or even a doctrinal mistake where you can forever after just have that corrected. So you can't go back and do that again. You can move your seat, but you can't change that moment. Whereas with doctrine and stuff, you can teach the wrong thing for a long time, and changing it changes everything. It may not change all the damage you do running around with false doctrine, God knows, but you can change being wrong. Anyway, so thou art bidden to any man to all right. He that bade thee, come and say, okay. So then he goes, okay, so don't do that. Don't sit in the high seat. But when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, Friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Again, here, this is a good example that shows the way worship can have different meanings. Because obviously he's not saying, they're going to worship you. They're going to worship you. Wow. You're such a star. What is the word worship here? I'm just curious. It's the it's funny thing. Yeah. It's doxa, which is the usual word for glory. Doxology. We have a couple words in English like doxology that go into that. I'll show it to you. Well, do I need to bring it up? Glory. I'll follow. Let's do a little. There we go. Let's do a little word fun. That should have worship. See the word worship? You can't see the little window that popped up, but I will bring up a new window instead. Honor, renown, glory. Well, that's usage. I noticed that the definition was opinion. Always good in the New Testament. Meaning, it's when people have a good opinion. It's funny because I've always tried to define glory, and I've never used the word opinion. Because I think I've gotten it from it because I must have read it at some point in the Strong's Dictionary. And he asked New American Standard, what does the Strong's say? Yeah, see here I was always going on the Strong's, which is from the base of dokeo, dokima. Yeah. I'm trying to remember. No. Okay. Glory is very apparent. And dokyo probably means opinion or something like that, right? As something very obvious. Or the idea of glory as being, I've always described it as the apparent greatness of something. And it basically means for people, the quality of people having a high opinion of you. I mean, of being high in the opinion of others. So I mean, glory, when God gets glory, it's when people have an opinion of him. But it's more than just a subjective opinion. God has glory before the world was. You know what I mean? Opinion is subjective. There is an objective glory. You know what I mean? So while we use a word that means opinion, the idea of glory transcends that mere human understanding of what glory. Because like we understand glory in terms of like, well, you know, there's a great victory, a great military victory, and they have a parade. And in the parade, you are manifesting the glory of the occasion. The celebration, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the celebration. It's not the cheering crowd. But it is the thing that brings all that to be. That's what glory is. And the same thing with this. It's not that people are bowing down to worship you. And Jesus didn't even use the word for worship. It's not the word for worship, because worship means to bow the head. People are not going to bow to you over your, wedding feast, social victory. They are going to, you will have, what he's saying, you're going to have glory in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Why? Because there was a moment there where you were sitting down, and then you were way down at the low table, and everyone's ignoring you. And then all of a sudden, the person who's throwing the party goes, "Oh, hey, you." And everyone's like, what's going on? And then, here, come up, sit up here. John, please, my friend here, I'd like him to sit. Would you please find another seat? Thanks, John. And that guy goes away. First should be last, the last shall be first. Not everyone sticking themselves up in the front ends up in the front. The Lord's going to come and look and say, like, no. I've said about the false prophets. The false prophets are all out front. They're on TV, right? Making a great name for themselves. And, well, surely he must be the great, the Lord is, just huge in the counsels of the Lord because he's got so much glory of men. He's put himself in the chief place of prophets and teachers. There he is on the television. And everyone on television must be important. Right? And, but when the Lord comes, the Lord of the feast, all that we are experiencing, we may find that things are going to be changed up, shaken up. And those who are at the bottom are going to be on the top. And those who are at the top are going to be moving down to the bottom. Maybe not kicked out. You know what I mean? False prophets, well, but, I don't know. It's like I said, there's a lot of interest when he talks about the judgment. There is such I've been studying this for, closing in on 30 years, closing in. What am I, 46? So I got serious about my religion in 19. But I've been reading the Bible since I was a kid, right? But seriously, since I was 19, so this is 27 years. And there are issues about the judgment that are just so hard to reconcile in terms of like a narrative, like this is how it's going to go. Like if I was going to describe to you the procedures of a lawsuit or a criminal trial. If I was going to go over to you, how does a criminal trial proceed? Well, it starts off with an arrest, and they charge him with a crime. Then there's a bail hearing, and then a trial date is set, and then there's a trial, and that proceeds according to certain, and then the witnesses of the trial, all this thing, right? And then he's either convicted or he's found not guilty. and then, either this or that, right? But when you talk about the judgment of God, it's a little bit, when you consider the idea of the resurrection, that there's a judgment way off after 1,000 years of Christ reigning on the earth, and there is also a judgment seat of Christ. At least, some people have it all reconciled. Obviously, people try to reconcile these things. They say, well, Paul, no, you've got to take that out, and you do this, and you do that. Yeah, I know there's like a dipsy doodle everyone does to like wrap it all up, and then it makes sense. It's easy to make sense of it when but the thing is, there are enough different opinions on the matter that it's like, it's hard for me to say that anyone, I'm like, that I've never heard anyone's position wrap it all up neatly and satisfactorily, taking all scriptures that are pertinent into account and certainly not giving them all equal weight. Some of them really get short shrift. Some of them really get, if you're a premillennialist, like I am, right? There's certain things that you're like, oh, that stuff is kind of, well, I don't know what to say about that. I'm not sure how that fits in exactly. And also depending on your view of death and hell and all these things and eternal torment or eternal destruction or whatever, or eternal reconciliation, the different viewpoints on hell and judgment, and there are different, because like the idea that servants should be punished with many stripes and some with few, and some first being last and last first. Like, does last mean you're done for, or does it mean you're in God's kingdom but you've squeezed in? And and at that point, it's hard for me I don't find the idea of some dirty preacher who's been fleecing people but still kind of believes in Jesus, or genuinely believes in Jesus, but it's been robbing the people blind, how he squeaks into the kingdom of God with any kind of dignity or other, but he's not thrust out. Not thrust out into outer darkness, but rather being saved, yet so as by fire. His works being burned, but yet he himself making it. Like, how that exactly, because I guess if I was a dirty preacher fleecing people, and then I came to the judgment, and I wasn't thrown into hell, but instead squeaked by, I would find that a cause for great rejoicing, though it's hard for me to imagine people who are like that thinking I thought I was going to be the most important people. Or maybe people who think they're really important genuinely, maybe not thinking they're ripping people off, right? I think people who genuinely are ripping people off cynically are not believers. They're not really believers. But people who are sincere believers, who are maybe prominent teachers who are wrong, blind, they don't know it, they don't realize how blind they are, but they're still just arrogant, but not self-aware enough to realize it. I don't know. On some level, just kind of like well-meaning, well-intentioned, but having like bad outcomes and turning people away from the faith, but out of a good heart. Maybe that's what we're talking about. And then maybe they find this out and they say, like, oh my goodness, am I doomed? And then they realize, no, because of your good heart, you still make it. In spite of all your, I would, in that position, like if I found out, oh, Paul, yeah, you suck. You all this you did, it sucks. Your music, terrible. Your studies were terrible, awful. The few people who listen to you misled them horribly. But I know you did it out of a good heart. You were trying to do what was right, and you squeaked by. I would still rejoice. But again, I'm not setting myself up at the head of everything. I don't think so. So I don't know. But if you do go at what you do humbly, the Lord will. God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble, as the Scripture says. So, the wedding feast is often an analogy of the judgment of God, or the entering into the kingdom. It's an analogy of God. Why is it an analogy of God's judgment? Because God's judgment is multiple things. There's more than one. I think that's authoritative. There is more than one judgment. There's the great white throne judgment. And as a Christian, I believe you don't want to have anything to do with that. You want to have you want it to be true of you that on you, the second death has no power. Right? Because you have passed from death unto life through faith in Jesus. And so all of us who have genuine faith in Jesus, great and small, will enter into God's kingdom, and he's going to say to us, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I think that's how it's supposed to be. Good and faithful enough. Now there is the whole, thou wicked and slothful servant, you knew I was an austere man, and you hid what I... There is a level at which, like the very bottom zero, the bottom of the bottom, you're out of here. Right? The bottom of the bottom gets tossed out. The worst of the worst. Like, no. I don't accept that. There is a level of, I'm a Christian, but it is such a sham that God completely tosses it out. I'm not accepting that. You don't play games with me. God is a serious God. Anyone putting forth a genuine and sincere effort to follow the gospel, to put their faith in Christ to the best of their understanding, my belief is that they will be saved, and there's no bones about it. All right, that's my belief, and I think that that's what the Scripture teaches. And as we put our faith in Him, we can trust in Him for our salvation. It's really as simple as that. But what it gets is men try to make it complicated because what's the first level of complexity? Men that they add to that. It's a very simple truth, but they'll add a layer of complexity, which is legalism. They'll say, oh, so all I got to do, well, what does it mean to put my faith in Him? So it's good enough I believe in Jesus and I think God's real? Well, I do. It's like, okay, yeah, that's all right, I think. Why are you asking it like that? Well, I was just, what's the minimum? What's the minimum? Because I was thinking, if I could just do the minimum and get in heaven, I think that's what I'm looking for. But it's like that. That's like you're playing with danger there. You're trifling with God. You must think to do not in terms of like, hey, I gotta do great things, but what's the best I can do? You know what I mean? You got to do the best you can do. We don't all have the same gifts. And not everyone's going to... I write the book of Revelation and the music and stuff, right? Not everyone has musical talent. Some people would say, I don't have musical talent, right? And on some level, I understand what they mean. I do. I don't consider myself a great musician. I certainly don't. And that's not fishing for compliments. I know I've been complimented by plenty of people. But I understand it's like... there are some people that are much better at it than I am. Okay, that's what I would say. But I know that some people can't do it at all. Couldn't write music, sing, carry a tune, whatever. Well, you don't have to do stuff like that. And you don't have to teach necessarily. I don't know, I can't talk and explain things. But you'd like to. But then you just, whatever we are capable of doing. You know what I mean? It's like you can love your brother. There's things we're all capable of that we can do. Add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge temperance, to temperance brotherly kindness, patience. All those things, that we are called to add to our faith. Our faith calls us to certain things. I seek glory. I want glory. I want it to come from God, though. I want glory. But I don't want the parade or the people cheering. But I do want to do the things that the cheering is about. You know what I mean? I like, because the glory, God, because Jesus says, the glory which I had with you from before the world was, in John 17. He talks about the glory he had with God before the world was. Before there were men to glorify God, God had glory. You know what I mean? There is, when God made the earth, even the earth, like when I go outside and just look, I go up in my barn and I'm up high and I can see out the windows I've put in, right? And I can see for miles around me this vast expanse, and it's glorious, beautiful. You know what I mean, it's that way whether there's ticker tape parades or not. That's just what it is. You know what I mean? People, I think it's hilarious. People say, well, if there's no one to observe it, it doesn't really exist. Only in a semantic sense. But because God exists, everything objectively has its glory. There's one glory of the sun, the glory of the moon and the stars. It's not because people are in awe of them. It's because they have awe. They are awe-inspiring on their own. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, I want to do things that are glorious on their own, and for the value of having done things such as that, for the glory that I will have to myself for having done it. I seek that. And that's how you ought to seek it. Because that's the kind of mentality that will lead you to take the low seat and just wait. Wait for God to lift you up. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. It's funny. Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. There's a song that goes along with that. I remember it's called the blah 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 doxology. I forgot which scripture it's from. I even forgot. Is it James or Jude? It's James or Jude, isn't it? I think it's James or Jude. Is it the Jude doxology? It's funny. Jude is such a short book. You think I'd memorize it. I think it was James or Jude. I'm not gonna look it up. But anyways, humble thyself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. Most people know that scripture. It's a good one to know. But do not do it to become lifted up. But that those things are uplifting in, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that I want myself to be lifted up, but I enjoy looking at the glory of the landscape around me or the stars. It is wonderful to be in the midst of something glorious. You know what I mean? I often have lamented about there's a musical album I've been working on and a lot of the music that I want to do I can't do because I don't have time, and it torments me to some degree. But I know, it's like. I want it. Why do I want to do it? Like the album I want to do, like my Book of Revelation that I've been working on, the second half and the full thing of it, and getting it just right. It's not because anyone wants me. I often laugh about it. I call it the album that nobody wants, that nobody's asking for, because I get like I'm the one who wants it to exist. It's something I want to come into being. I want to be in the midst of that happening. You know what I mean? I want to stand at the center of that glory, not because I'm at the center of it, because I want to see it. I don't care if anyone observes it except me. I do care if I know the Lord sees. That's at the back of everything. I know the Lord sees everything. So that's what's informing my attitude towards everything. I just want to be in the midst of glorious deeds. You know what I mean? And the thing is, you don't have to have great skill. Something done in love can be glorious, and it doesn't require a ton of intellect. Just the right amount of compassion. We got to stir up our love one for another, and we can do glorious things. Stir up our patience, and we can have glory in doing that which is right. You know what I mean? So there is glory in all those things. So don't jump at that. People grasp for that which is high and what doesn't belong to them. You know what I mean? Like they think first, I'll build a big ministry. Even though they aren't good teachers. They learn to say things people want to hear. You know what I mean? If you say things people want to hear, a lot of people will listen. If you make the music people like, they like hit songs all sound the same because they're made on formulas. They know what a hit song sounds like. It's led to the homogenization of music, and a lot of music connoisseurs don't like it because, I know there are people who like my music. I mean, like I said, I'm not fishing for compliments because it's like, I know there are people, but the regardless, even though there are people who like it, I rejoice with them, but it's not. I don't do it for people are going to like this. Don't sit down at the lowest seat. I'm going to make a show out of it. It's just because I'm going to sit here. It's not a big deal. Not expecting to be called. When you do sit down at the lowest seat, not expecting to be called up. You know what I mean? Because look at, if I take my ministry, for example, I've been teaching the Bible for over 25 years, primarily to one person. You know what I mean? That's a very small ministry indeed. And obviously it's more than that, right? But I'm saying, all the other people who study with me come and go. I only have one consistent student over that period of time. There's only one person who has studied with me all that time. You know what I mean? It's a small ministry. If my thought is, by being humble, Jesus is going to come along and pretty soon, he's going to reward my humility. You know what I mean? And I'm going to have a big ministry. You know what I mean? Like if that's the thought, it'll lead to discontent. You know what I mean? I'm going to be sitting down there at the wedding. Like you don't go to the wedding, your best friend's wedding, and take the lowest seat. And then when he doesn't call you, get bitter. It's my best friend's wedding. And I'm sitting down here. And that guy is sitting up right near the head table, laughing and yucking it up with my best friend. You know what I mean? And here I sit down here expecting that he'll notice. I'm sitting down here, down at the low seat. Why doesn't he see my low estate? Look at how hard I'm working all these years on Bible studies consistently, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's like when I say about when I received the Holy Spirit, I prayed for years to receive the Holy Spirit, but I wasn't praying as much as I probably could have or should have or would have. If I'd known, it would have made a difference. If I really believed it would have made a difference. It's like my Bible study. I've been teaching the Bible study for 25 years. Sure, once a week. And then once every other week sometimes. Sometimes once a month. You know what I mean? A lot of times I was in times past, I was doing fewer Bible studies, but I was doing more other stuff. Like answering emails, writing more music. So as I was serving I was serving a similar level, but it wasn't I was focused on Bible study per se. Yeah, but similar level. I wasn't serving as much as I would hope to, I would hope to the level I would like to get to. I mean, the level, if I truly wanted my ministry to be blessed, quote unquote, whatever that means, my ministry is blessed. My ministry is blessed because I get to keep doing it because I have a student. As long as I have a student, I have a ministry. You know what I mean? I remember seeing like some video of like Robert Tilton, right? He used to have a TV ministry and all that. And now he was like at a hotel preaching in a hotel like meeting conference room to like 12 people. And although I don't like him particularly, and I don't think he's a good teacher, I do admire the fact. I admire the fact that he still sticks with it. I don't know. It's a different kind of admiration, but the fact that, like, hey, he's still got students, so he's still got a ministry, even if he's still trying to fleece them for all the money they got. Even if he's still a false teacher, he's still got as long as you got students, you got ministry. And that's all that matters, as far as that goes. So my ministry is blessed. So there's somebody here to hear it. As long as there's people to hear it. I'm glad there's more than just one. But I'm just saying, over the course of 25 years, it's like there's one. And that's small. That's enough. That's all. That's the excuse I have for keeping going. Because sometimes it's just one. Because there's because if you walk into that room to do the Bible study and there's nobody there. Nobody there. If you ever come in and there's zero to do. There's no work for you. There's no place at any table. I'm happy to be at the wedding. I don't care. And if he doesn't talk to me, if he doesn't need me to come up there right now, I'll talk to him later. He is my best friend. See that guy sitting up at the head table? He's insecure. He could use a friend. He needs position. I don't. I'm confident in my position. The Lord is my friend. I don't need to be in any more chief seat than right where I am right now. I am here at his wedding, and I'm glad to be there. That's the attitude you need to bring to your humility. You do not, don't be humble because it's what you're supposed to do. It's not easy. I assume it's not. I don't know. It can be difficult because people like to do great things. You know what I mean? I don't think when I say it's not easy, I want to say it is easy because I think it is easy for me, and it's because it's like I said the whole thing, but it's like don't think it represents much virtue on my part. It's easy for me. That's not. If it's a virtue, it's one I just got built in. It's nothing I had to work hard to get, so I don't find it impressive. It shouldn't impress anybody. It's no big deal. It's not meant to be impressive. It's something I do understand and have learned about humility. Because it's like, you end up bitter. Just like the prodigal son, the faithful son was like, he got bitter about it because he's like, I've served you faithfully all those years. And this guy was gone astray, and now you've killed the fatted calf for him. You didn't kill any fatted calf for me. Where's my fatted calf? The glory, the faithful son has his glory, and just accept it for what it is. It's, it's like, you have to trust that, like he said, all that I have is yours. But this one that was dead is alive. But all that I have is yours. Okay. Let's see. For whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that humble himself shall be exalted. We'll pick it up with verse 12 tomorrow. Verse 11 nicely summarizes what we've been talking about. There's no need to explain it any further than that. Okay? Thanks for joining me this day. I look forward to studying with you again tomorrow.